Imagine walking into a courthouse not as a criminal, not as a lawyer, not even as a juror, but as a 17-year-old boy carrying nothing but a school project, only to leave with the weight of a nation's corruption on your shoulders. This is the story of Malik Johnson and the judge who tried to break him. Atlanta, a city of contradictions. On one side, you see skyscrapers gleaming in the sun, restaurants buzzing with laughter, and highways filled with shiny cars that never seem to stop moving. On the other side, tucked away in the shadows of those same highways, are neighborhoods where the air feels heavier, where children carry inhalers in their backpacks the same way they carry pencils, and where ambulances race down cracked streets almost every evening. This is the Atlanta Malik Johnson grew up in, 17 years old, tall and lean, with the kind of eyes that always seem to be asking questions, even when his lips stayed closed. Malik wasn't just another teenager from the South Side. He was curious, restless, the kind of boy who would take apart an old radio just to see what wires made the music play, and then put it back together, sometimes better than before. But Malik's curiosity didn't come from a place of luxury. It came from survival. He had watched his little cousin, Deshaun, struggle to breathe during the summers when the air turned thick and gray. He had walked with his best friend Keisha to the corner store only to watch her collapse halfway, wheezing, clutching her chest, her inhaler rattling in her trembling hand. Too many times, Malik had sat in hospital waiting rooms, the smell of antiseptic burning his nose, while mothers prayed and fathers paced, all asking the same question. Why are our children always the ones gasping for air? And one day, Malik decided he couldn't just ask questions anymore. He had to find answers. Building the dream, it started with scraps. Old sensors from discarded computers. Wires his uncle found at a thrift shop. A second-hand laptop with a cracked screen. Malik spent months in his bedroom, hunched over a table that once served as his grandmother's ironing board, soldering wires together, burning his fingers, cursing under his breath, but never giving up. He wanted to build something that could measure the air, something that could prove what everyone in his neighborhood already knew deep down. The air was poisoned, and it was killing them slowly. By winter, Malik had built a compact monitoring system no bigger than a lunchbox. It looked fragile like a toy, but inside it carried the power to record levels of particulate matter, carbon monoxide, and other toxins. Piece by piece, he mounted it on rooftops, lampposts, and even church steeples, carefully mapping the air quality across Atlanta. What he found confirmed his worst fears. In predominantly black, low-income neighborhoods, toxin levels were nearly 3 times higher than in the wealthy white suburbs just a few miles away. The data was undeniable. Every time the pollution spiked, hospital records showed a surge in respiratory emergencies, mostly children. Malik had built more than a machine. He had built evidence. The invitation. One crisp Monday morning, Malik received a letter that changed everything. It came on thick, official paper stamped with the seal of Fulton County. His hands trembled as he read out loud to his mother in the kitchen. Dear Mr. Johnson, we are pleased to invite you to present your project before the County Environmental Policy Committee meeting at the courthouse on Thursday. Your findings may play a crucial role in shaping upcoming legislation. His mother's eyes filled with tears. You see, Malik, all those nights you stayed up soldering wires, all those times I told you to rest, this is what God was preparing you for. Malik smiled, but deep down he was nervous. This wasn't a science fair at school. This was real. Adults in suits, officials with power. Could a 17-year-old boy really make them listen? Still, he packed his project into a small case, polished his shoes, and ironed his only blazer. Thursday morning, he left home with his head high, whispering to himself, "You're not doing this for you. You're doing it for every kid who couldn't breathe." The courthouse. Atlanta's courthouse stood like a fortress. Gray stone walls, metal detectors, and guard with eyes that never softened. Malik arrived early, his project clutched tightly in his hands. But as he stepped through the metal detector, the machine beeped sharply. Officer Daniels, a broad man with a shaved head and a permanent scowl, stepped forward. "What's in the case, son?" Malik opened it carefully, showing the small device inside. "It's a monitoring system, sir, for a presentation today." Daniels frowned, suspicious. "Monitoring system? Looks like some kind of bomb to me." Malik's heart skipped. "No, sir. It's just sensors and wires. It's science equipment. I was invited to present it." But Daniels didn't listen. He called for backup. Two more guards appeared, their hands hovering near their holsters. Malik froze, fear shooting through his chest. And that's when Judge Charles Whitaker appeared. Whitaker was infamous in Atlanta. A tall, pale man in his 60s with a face carved in stone and eyes that seemed to enjoy watching others squirm. He had a reputation for giving the harshest sentences, especially to young black men. "What's going on here?" Whitaker asked, his voice sharp. "This boy tried to bring in some suspicious device," Daniels replied. Whitaker's gaze fell on Malik. "Why aren't you in school, boy?" Malik swallowed hard. "I have permission to present my research to the Environmental Policy Committee." The judge smirked. "Research? Is that what we're calling toys these days?" Before Malik could speak, Whitaker waved his hand. "Confiscate it. Bring him to my courtroom." The sun had barely risen over Atlanta when Malik arrived at the courthouse steps. His blazer was wrinkled from lack of sleep, his eyes heavy but burning with determination. In his hand, he clutched a folder. Every note, every detail, every name he had written down the night before, just like Uncle James told him. Inside those pages was a story of what happened. The checkpoint, the humiliation, the confiscation of his project. It wasn't just a record. It was his shield. As he stood there, people rushed past him, lawyers, clerks, janitors pushing carts. None of them knew that the boy standing silently by the courthouse doors was carrying more than papers. He was carrying a battle. The courthouse steps. Judge Whitaker emerged, his black robe flowing behind him like a shadow. Malik stepped forward, his heart pounding. "Your Honor," Malik said firmly, "this is my project. Here are the grant papers, my ownership documents, and the invitation letter from the committee. You have no right to keep it." Whitaker didn't even glance at the papers. His lips curled into a smirk. "This is my courthouse, boy. I decide what happens here. And I say your toy is a security threat." Malik's throat tightened, but he stood tall. "It's not a toy. It's science. It's proof. And you're afraid of it." For the first time, Whitaker's smile faltered. He brushed past Malik, muttering, "Stay out of grown men's business." But Malik didn't move. He whispered to himself, "Not this time. Not anymore." The basement showdown. Later that morning, Malik slipped quietly into the lower halls of the courthouse. A janitor he recognized from the day before had tipped him off. Whitaker had ordered the device sent to the disposal room in the basement. The air down there was damp and heavy, the smell of bleach clinging to the walls. Malik's footsteps echoed as he followed the sound of metal being dragged across the floor. And then he saw him. Judge Whitaker stood over Malik's device, holding a hammer in his hand. The wires and sensors lay scattered across a steel table like a body about to be buried. Whitaker raised the hammer. Time to put an end to this nonsense. Stop. Malik's voice cracked as he rushed into the room. Whitaker turned, eyes gleaming with cruel satisfaction. You again. Persistent, aren't you? But before he could strike, another voice cut through the room. Judge Whitaker. A woman stepped into the basement. Laura Chun, a young public defender with sharp eyes and an even sharper sense of justice. She had overheard Malik's story the night before and tracked him down. Destroying evidence in your own courthouse? Laura said coldly, Do you realize what you're doing? Whitaker sneered. This is no evidence. This is junk. And you, Miss Chun, have no authority here. Laura didn't flinch. She pulled out her phone. Then maybe the person on the other end of this call does. The voice on the line. Whitaker hesitated. For the first time, his hand trembled slightly on the hammer. Who is it? Laura handed him the phone. Answer it. Whitaker pressed it to his ear, annoyance dripping from his voice. Who is this? The reply was steady, commanding, impossible to ignore. This is David Johnson, the United States Attorney General, and you're holding my son's property. Whitaker's face went pale. His lips parted, but no words came out. The hammer slipped from his hand, clattering loudly against the concrete floor. Mr. Johnson, Whitaker stammered. I didn't know. On the line, David Johnson's voice was like steel. You knew enough, and you will release that device immediately. Agents are already on their way. The FBI arrives. Within hours, the courthouse swarmed with FBI agents in dark suits. The same officers who had once sneered at Malik now stepped aside nervously as federal badges flashed in their faces. Malik watched as Whitaker, once untouchable, was cornered in his own chambers. The agents weren't just here for Malik's project. They had questions about rulings, about patterns, about years of suspicious decisions. And Malik's data suddenly became more than science. It became the missing piece of a puzzle the federal government had been struggling to solve. The bigger conspiracy. Investigators laid Malik's pollution maps side by side with Whitaker's sentencing records. The connection was undeniable. The neighborhoods with the worst air quality, the same neighborhoods Malik had studied, were also the ones where Whitaker handed down the harshest sentences. Young men locked away for minor offenses, families destabilized, communities weakened. And behind it all was Senator Richard Vaughn. Vaughn's real estate companies had quietly bought up polluted land at dirt cheap prices. The worse the neighborhoods became, the easier it was for him to acquire property. Cleanup efforts were delayed, health crises ignored, and people forced to leave. When the air cleared, because eventually it always did, Vaughn resold the land for millions. Whitaker had been his silent partner all along. The ethics hearing. The scandal shook Atlanta like an earthquake. Within a week, an emergency ethics hearing was called. Malik sat in the audience, his rebuilt device resting on the table before him. At the front, Judge Whitaker sat stripped of his robe, his once commanding posture now hunched and fragile. Charts, phone records, and expert testimonies were presented. University professors had already validated Malik's work, proving the science beyond question. Whitaker's lawyer fought desperately. This is a high school project. It cannot be admissible in a case of this magnitude. But the evidence was too strong. The science was too clear. Finally, Whitaker broke. His voice cracked as he leaned forward. I'll talk. I'll tell you everything, if I get consideration. And then, in front of cameras, he confessed. Years of cooperation with Vaughn. Years of silencing cases, bending rules, and crushing communities so the senator could profit. The room erupted in gasps. The collapse of an empire. The fallout was immediate. Vaughn's development stocks plummeted overnight. Headlines screamed across the nation. High school science project exposes judicial corruption. 3 other judges quietly requested leave. Vaughn was placed under federal investigation. And for the first time in decades, Atlanta's communities began to hope for change. Through it all, Malik stayed focused on his work. He rebuilt his sensors, cleaned the wires, and uploaded his data again. His project, once mocked as junk, was now evidence of one of the largest corruption cases in the state's history. A science project becomes evidence. When Malik finally stood at the state conference, the room was packed, not just with scientists and officials, but with reporters, cameras, and federal agents ensuring his safety. He spoke with the same steady voice he had used in that first committee room. But this time, the whole country was listening. And when he finished, the Environmental Committee voted unanimously to fund citywide expansion of his monitoring system. Malik had not just proven a point. He had built a movement. The homecoming. That night, when Malik returned home, his mother wrapped him in the longest hug he had ever felt. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "Did you ever imagine it would go this far?" she asked softly. Malik shook his head. "I only wanted cleaner air for our neighborhood." Behind him, his father stepped forward. The U.S. Attorney General was no longer just a distant figure in Washington. He was a father, proud and humbled. He placed a hand on Malik's shoulder. "And you will have it. But you've also shown the country something bigger, that justice and science together can expose truths even powerful men can't bury." Malik looked out the window, the city lights flickering against the night sky. He remembered Whitaker's first words at the courthouse. "You're just another black boy with no future." Now, as the nation repeated his name with respect, he whispered to himself, "You were wrong." Closing reflections. And so the story of Malik Johnson became more than a headline, more than a scandal. It became a reminder that sometimes the smallest voices, the ones people dismiss, silence, or mock, carry the loudest truths. That justice is not only written in courtrooms, but can be drawn in the lines of a child's sketch. And that one boy, armed with nothing but curiosity, determination, and a dream for cleaner air, can change the air a whole country breathes.